Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the September Lunch and Learn from the Harmon Museum and the Warren County Historical Society. I'm John Zimkus. I am the Education Director and Historian here, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here. We have a lot of things that you could stay and visit after our talk today. Your admission here also gives you free admission to the museum. We have some brand new exhibits. If you haven't been here in a year or two, you will be surprised how many things have changed. We have a gallery on the second floor, the main floor, which is the Gary Semendinger Gallery, and it has items from our collection which normally don't get put up there. So some very different things there, but there's also the Village Green, there is the Farm Gallery, the Transportation Gallery. Through that door over here, you have the Armstrong Gallery of Flight. Neil Armstrong living near us here for over 20 years, longer than any other time in his entire life. So take advantage of that. We have some other things taking place. Next Thursday, the 29th, there will be a Lebanon Cemetery tour. I have the pleasure of being your guide through that. It'll be at 6 o'clock, $20 is the admission. We will go through the cemetery, we will visit the graves, and in some cases, the people who are buried there will tell you their story. Everything from Civil War generals to Civil War Army nurses to presidents of universities, to the lady who integrated the Girl Scout camps here in Warren County. So some fascinating things taking place there. On Friday and Saturday, through the month of October, beginning, however, on the 30th, there will be a ghost walk. There'll be two of them. On Friday, they will be through town, and I believe, and on Saturday, they will be at Glendower. Those are at 8 o'clock. $10 for members and $15 for non-members. We're trying something very new on October 13th. It is the Edgar Allan Poe Tea. And Jeannie, will it be here?
It will actually be in the Village Green.
In the Village Green. It's $40 for members, $45 for non-members. You'll have some delicious tea, you'll have entertainment, perhaps, I'm sure, a poem or two. And I don't know if any ravens will be flying around, but I'm sure you will enjoy it. The Edgar Allan Poe Tea, October 13th, 1 to 3. As far as lunch and learns go, we have some interesting ones coming up. I was just talking to Jeannie. She will be our speaker on October. In October, it will be What Are We Wearing? It is, or what are you wearing? History of fabric. How the fabric through the years changed with new discoveries, with new ways of dyeing, with new ways of weaving. And we have such a fantastic textile department here that you'll see some examples of our great collection here as Jeannie explores how things have changed. November, we will have our good friend Fred Compton. Thanksgiving, a fabricated holiday, will be our speaker, and that will be our topic. Then Linda Martin, who is with us today, you may recall her from a year or so ago where she brought in her fantastic Halloween artifact collections, going back to the early 20th century to the 1960s and 70s. Now she is clearing out another part of her basement, and it'll be Christmas collectibles from the past, a dime store Christmas. So she will have part of her collection there, and it'll be fantastic, get you in the mood for the season, and I think you will thoroughly enjoy that. So we have a lot of things going on. Hopefully you will take advantage of what we have here and perhaps come join us for some other things. And I am very happy to introduce our speaker. I have known Suzanne Taylor for 30 years, or over 30 years. Yeah. She is a graduate of Mason High School. She attended Miami University. She graduated in 1991. In the late fall of that year, she was a student teacher at Berry Junior High School, and her cooperating teacher was this relatively tall guy with a mustache and somewhat of a deep voice. And I was very much impressed with her then. I was privileged enough to be invited to her wedding in the summer of 1992 when she married Ryan Taylor. She spent her first years teaching, 8 of them, at Marymount Junior High School, being a geography teacher. She came to the Lebanon schools in the year 2000, first at the junior high, where once again, this time we were colleagues. Then she moved on to the high school. Her husband, Ryan, also taught at the junior high. Recently, however, there is a plot to take over the Lebanon City School District. Their son, Nick, was hired to be a teacher at the high school. Their son, Scott, was hired to be the athletic director at the junior high. And their daughter-in-law was hired to be a special teacher? Special ed teacher at Berry. At lunch, she told the story about how her husband and her 2 sons are all varsity coaches of the football team. And a player came up and said, "I got to talk to Coach Taylor." So Ryan, her husband, turns around and says, "What can I do for you?" He says, "Not you, young Taylor." So Scott turns around and says, "What can I do for you?" "Not you, babies, Coach Taylor." So there is a family tradition of educators, which is great because she's a good example of that. Speaking of family, her talk today is about her family, her maternal grandmother. Probably beginning while in school, she was a pen pal to a young man in Paris. Their relationship continued beyond high school with letters, and then World War II approached. And the letters perhaps got a little bit more serious than they intended, but nonetheless fascinating. My pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, Suzanne Taylor.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here today. I have to excuse my voice a little bit. I have a touch of bronchitis from doing homecoming, chaperoning homecoming outside. But I feel fine. So I'm very excited to be here. Like Mr. Zimkus said, I am a high school history teacher, so I kind of feel like I'm cheating that this is what I do every day. And I have done this presentation for about 10 years with my students, and they really enjoy it, or they pretend like they do. So I wanted to share, I did the presentation in April for the Mason Historical Society, and then I reached out to Mr. Zimkus about perhaps doing it here. I've had family in Lebanon for quite a while. My grandfather, Bill McCurley, and his brother, Bob McCurley, had an implement company that was across from Berry, the McCurley Implement. I still have a great aunt who's 94 who lives here in town as well. So Lebanon has always been a second home to me, but it's certainly been my home since 1992 when my husband and I moved here. So this is about my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. Her name was Betty Cummings, and she, in school, became pen pals with a young man named Maurice. And so this is my grandmother, Betty Cummings, and this is her pen pal, Maurice, and that is the card that he sent. So these are all photocopies of the actual letters that we still have, and pictures that we still have as well. That's my grandmother's senior picture, I believe. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So, and then this is also my grandmother. So I'm going to start his letters here. It is April 28th, 1937. He says, I see that you are a sport girl. I like it. Not any word in French is the translation of cheerleader, and I don't understand that game, which consists of yelling. I don't see also the need of a uniform to play this curious game. So my grandmother was Mason's very first female cheerleader. They made her wear overalls, but she was the first cheerleader in Mason, so she must have written a letter, and I'm sure she was quite proud of that. He also says, I am very sorry of the death of your brother, and I present to you my sincere condolences. Maybe it seems banal in a letter, but it comes from the heart. It's a very sad event, but all is passing away. And if we were always thinking to our pains and sorrows, we shall never be happy. And we are on this earth to profit of the spring and the joy of the nature. I shall be very pleased to get a picture of him. So in December of 1936, my grandmother's only sibling, her brother Rex Cummings, was hit by a train at Hageman's Crossing. He was coming up here to Lebanon from Mason, and he was killed. And so that's a picture of my grandmother and her brother, and then her days as a cheerleader. So he says, but let us speak of something else. I am still too young to speak so wisely. I'm living in Paris with my family of 4, my mother, my father, my sister, 13 years old, and myself. I am like you, proud of my parents. They're both working together. We have a big shop and we sell potatoes. It seems funny to say, but true. Nothing else, only potatoes. It's a shop in Hall Central, and we buy the goods everywhere in France and some in England and Deutschland sometimes. Have you ever heard of such a business? So this is some pictures I found. This is his address and what it looks like today. And then this is the market that he's talking about. August 30th, 1937. I'm going to make you miserable. I have never heard of your radio station, WLW. But now, thanks to you, I know it. My radio is not strong to get it. So here are some slides, some pictures that he sent to my grandmother of famous things around Paris. I'm sure she was thrilled to get these pictures. I imagine that she probably sent pictures back to him of her life as well. So these are just, and this is pictures of him on vacation, okay, going to the Alps and skiing. And then he also sent her a map of where he went and also some postcards of places in Europe as well. He says, October 28th, 1938. Now, will you please excuse me if I am late, but I've been very busy these weeks because of the threat of war hanging upon us like the sword of Damocles. It has been very awful, and I think every people here ought to thank your president. Now, everything is all right till Hitler will again have the fit of a madman. In France, everything was like in wartime, soldiers everywhere, lights shut every night, and I can say that during 2 weeks, Paris had a curious feel to it. So he also sent her these ads for cars. We think that's because my grandmother's father, he had a car shop in Mason, so he sold Buicks in Mason. So I think that's why he probably sent her information about cars. So of course this is the Munich Agreement that was signed in 1938, where Hitler was basically given what he wanted. And so that was September 1938. And then here again, when the Sudetenland was given over, Chamberlain made his famous declaration that we will have peace in our times, and everyone was hopeful. He says also, now I shall answer to your letter. Don't be afraid about Hitler. It's like an ogre who eats little children. Someday, he will want to eat a man like him, and he will die. For Hitler, it's the same. He takes something here, something there, but one day he would certainly take too much, and he will be knocked down. So these are the actual letters where he references Hitler and talks about Hitler. And even after reading these letters numerous times, when I actually hold the letter in my hand and see in his penmanship where he talks about Hitler and knowing how it was right then and there, and that was his time, and how it's his reality, it is still kind of shocking to me to remember that that's what he was facing in that moment and at that time. So, of course, Germany is on the move in 1939. And he says in October of 1939, okay, so he makes references to Hitler being moving, taking. And of course, September 1st is the first day of World War I, when the Blitzkrieg happened and the Nazis invaded Poland. He says, it's over. The war is here. Already 2 months. We don't suffer much with our friend Dadlier. We were completely ready, and Germany will be beat very quickly if Russia was out of the battle. But now it will certainly last 3 or 4 years. Why don't you come to us? We need America. You know that. We fight for your civilization and your democratic people. Why are you staying out? Don't you remember Lafayette? Germany has already killed lots of American people. See the Athenia. The SS Athenia was the first UK passenger ship sunk in World War II on September 3rd, 1939. 28 Americans were killed on that sinking. Do you say anything? Are you so low now? You, the big Union of America. Do you think Roosevelt is against us? About me, I am waiting orders to be a soldier. We have men, but we need materials, and young of 20 like me are still at home. We want and need for help, and we call special services of defense passive to fight against our air raids. Don't be cautious for me, dear friend. I shall write to you everywhere I may be. It is good to know I have friends when you are in the front lines. May God, I never go there, but I am not afraid. I'm ready to do my duty against savages and barbarous people. I don't need especially anything particular from you, but all we need of help, USA. I have everything I need, but if you want to help us, you can send old clothes or money to our government for soldiers, our external defense, but it's not really necessary. In France and in England, we are decided vigorously to put down Hitler and to parcel out Germany. We must restore Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Polish people. Is it not equality and justice? We shall fight till we die for freedom, the best treasure of humanity. I joined this letter a little picture of myself, that you will certainly be happy to get it. Souvenirs of a French boy who's ready to fight for liberty of all the people in the world. Your faithful friend, waiting to be your ally in the new war of humanity against barbarity. Maurice. December 1939. What are you going to do now with that new war, Soviet and Finland? Will you help Finland or declare the war to Soviet people? Cowards. 150 million against 3 million. Poor little people. Now they're no more in security. We must put Germany and Russia down. It is the coax against barbary for freedom. Why do you stay quiet? Can't you come with us? We don't have till now any air raid and no bombers over us. Perhaps they are afraid of our Air Force and they stay quiet. We can sleep. It's not like the poor people of Helsinki and Finland. I was hoping to see you in USA in the middle of the year 1940, but now it's impossible. I can't go out of town. I must keep my money for my family. Maurice. February 13th, 1940. I am very sorry for this accident which touched you so much. You have to live out with people with which you are not used to. It must be terrible to see the fire burn everything you like or you have. With such experiences arrive to you, you can imagine what are the great disasters of the poor Finn every day overflown by the Russian bombers. So my grandmother, her house was where the Yost Pharmacy parking lot is in Mason, and the house next door caught on fire. And the woman died, my grandmother's neighbor died in the house fire, and my grandmother had to rescue her blind grandmother from the fire. So she was 17 years old, but she rescued her. So that's what he's referring to about the accident. He says, you have been very courageous and saved your grandmother of a certain death. I am proud to know a girl like you. The war is a terrible calamity and burst into slivers every plan you might have been doing. I should show you everything which must be seen here, but all of this is a dream because the chief of a powerful country is a madman. We shall have to sell my car soon, and happy if my parents can still live with the same way of living. Every French and English people have taken what we call restrictions. It means to keep money for things useful and for the state. Pray God you will stay out of the food cards. The war is a terrible thing, and every day pass is a step to more sadness and unhappiness. Let us see what happens. It says, do you think Roosevelt will be elected again? Do you think you will stay out of the conflict always and always? Won't you help the Finns with your army and your navy? If the Finns are beaten, what will you do? You can't leave Russia to eat every Scandinavian country, one after another. Why don't you say something? Everybody here is very astonished, you see. You, the most important country, I mean democratic country on earth of liberty, are not going in war to defend this liberty? For us, it's exactly like 1789. We are fighting to defend our freedoms and our country. English people are doing the same, and the French also. It's the League of Liberty against the League of Barbarian people, against tyrants. Austria, Czechoslovakia, and the Poles must be free. And France, the mother of liberty, will give again the freedom to the country. But for you, it's a dream. You're doing anything? Can't you see that if we are beaten by the Nazi, they will take power in the USA? You like freedom. Why are you not coming to help us? Is the statue in New York Harbor only a statue? Is it not a symbol? You are a curious nation. You speak very much, but often don't act very much. Men say that Hitler is waiting until the spring to attack us, but he can come. We're ready to receive him. And certainly in 2 or 3 months, the situation will not be the same. Everybody knows that Paris may be bombed in 2 months, but nobody is afraid. And we stay quiet, exactly like we were not in war. You asked me about my father. He was wounded in 1915, and he is reformed, so he can't do the war again. I shall take his place very soon, and I hope when I shall be a soldier, you will be nice and write often, because a soldier needs distractions. You will be my war friend in the USA. Please write often. I leave you now. Don't forget me. Maurice. April 14th, 1940. Since my last letter, the events changed. First, the Russian peace, and now the German attack against Denmark and Norway. What do you think of that? And certainly Sweden will be attacked too. Don't believe too much what your newspaper says about war news. They say everything they heard, and sometimes it's not true at all. They have had air raid, but never German planes have flown over Paris. They were not in the north of France, and we were informed by the sirens, but the planes never flew over us. I never had food prepared the American way, and I have no idea what it can be. For instance, you're telling me something about hot dog? I suppose it's a sort of beefsteak, is it not? Do you drive? I think so. I suppose every girl in USA drives, and your spirit is not like ours. Here, a woman drives only when she really needs to for her work or anything else, but she does not drive for pleasure. A man always drives when he is with a woman. Do you understand that what I tried to explain to you? It's a matter of courtesy, like a man holds the door for a woman. You have this conception when you are with Bill, that's my future grandfather. I suppose you drive sometimes, but you will see a girl never drive. It's the old French gallantry. Have you heard of it? I thank you for your description of the American Constitution, but you have to tell me something now. What is the difference between Democratic and Republican? It's difficult to me to understand because we are Republicans in France, but we are Democratic too. They both go together, and that's our ideal, the thing we are fighting for. I must tell you first that in France, women are out of politics. They don't vote, but keep the house clean and comfortable and raise their children. And my opinion is that's better than politics for a girl. I would have loved to have known my grandmother's response to that. She may have been a little before her time and her backbone. May 19th, 1940. Then 3 other countries in the war. What do you think of that? Will you always stay out of this war for freedom? If you were here and you can see all these poor refugees, you will understand that we are fighting against a terrible nation led by a madman. At this date, the situation is pretty bad for us. The Germans are already in the north of France and they are walking to Paris. I hope they will be stopped, but if they are not, if they take Paris, then France will always be the French, and we are determined to fight until we die. I don't know what you really think about all these things, but you certainly are a fool to think that this war is not your war too. If you sleep quiet in your bed now, it's because the French and English are fighting for the liberty of the world. If we are democratic, you are too. You win yet a lot of normalcy, but it's not fair. For you, we give our blood to pay. Don't you remember the American Legion? We must kill Hitler like a mad dog and put Germany in pieces. His men are used to killing babies and women of the world, are walking in the streets with their machine guns. It's horrible to say, and we see things that the barbarians themselves were not used to seeing. And somebody's talking about modern civilization. Be careful. Look out. The German news is false, and the Nazi propaganda is to deter you from the Allies. Don't believe their lies. You must help us, or in 2 or 3 years, it'll be your turn to be attacked, and you will be alone because we shall be dead. My mother and father are all right, thank you, till now, but nobody can say anything in 1 hour. We may be dead with an air raid. They are over Paris night and day, but they don't throw any bombs till now. Maybe I shall be 1 or 2 months without writing anything to you, but don't be afraid. I shall always write when it will be possible. Try to do something for us. We need your help. I will always be your best friend over the sea and waiting that we shall be allies. Maurice. May 26, 1940. We have here with the war so much to do. Our workmen are on the go, called by the government. We have to do it by ourselves. I never worked so much in my life. Now our war is the only war in the world. Everywhere it's peaceful except here. I don't understand why the Times have been accepted the Soviet peace. It's been a suicide. I suppose they wait some time to take revenge. They will certainly do something when we shall be in Poland fighting the Soviets after having destroyed the Germans, and hang Hitler unter den Linden, under the Leiden, which is a type of tree, like they used to say in Germany if they lose the war. But I must tell you something, you American democratic people are a big deception for us French. It's petty, yes, to stay out of the conflict, but is that all? Are you really a republic ready to defend the democratic idea, or only a big commercial enterprise? You make money when we are making the war and dying for freedom. Isn't that true? Excuse me if I am rude, please, but that Russian peace for us was a big emotion and disruptive. We were ready to go there and take Germany back, but now it is no longer possible. And that peace for us means 2 or 3 years war or more. Can you understand that? Goodbye for now, and say with me, Vive la France. So as I tell my students, his words sting, they're harsh, but you have to remember his reality of seeing France, seeing the Nazis, seeing perhaps Hitler, knowing what is happening in his country. Okay, that's the train car that was used to be the peace treaty of Versailles was signed there to end World War I. Hitler made them take that car out of a museum in Campania, France, put it in the exact same spot that they signed the peace treaty to end World War I, and made the French surrender to him. He walked off the train car. You can see him there, so happy. And then they blew the train car up, and he felt that that was the ultimate revenge, and that's what he was wanting and looking for against the French. And then, of course, the famous picture of the Parisians watching the Nazis march down the Champs-Élysées. And the French resistance. So that's his last letter of May 1940. And obviously the war continues, but my grandmother does not hear from him again. So I'm sure for all those years, she's wondering, of course, what has happened to him. So his last letter is May 26, 1940. She then gets a letter May 1st, 1945. It says, "Excuse my English, but we were only speaking in French. Dear Betty, as you can see by this letter, I am still living. Many things happened to me during those 5 years of war and occupation, and it'll be nearly a story to relate everything. I have always your last letter, so kind and friendly, and some days sad and bleak. It was comforting to think I got a good friend over the sea. And, as we used to say in French, it was not rosy every day with Germans, but thanks to God, it's now finished. In few words, I'll tell you what was becoming of me during this time of silence between us. In the beginning of June 1940, we must evacuate Paris before the Germans advance. I was right going to join the army, but it was too late and I had no time to do it. Moreover, a few days later, everything was over. It was the 24th of June. For France, the war was finished, and Germans were our masters. But happily, General de Gaulle was here, calling every Frenchman to fight, always against Germans and Italians. I and my family were gone on the roads. It was terrible, things that happily for you American people, you will never know. We have left everything and we got on our car, on the roads, everywhere elsewhere. We don't know where. Finally, after the armistice, we were back in Paris. Germans were everywhere and life taken us again. One day in 1941, I tried to write to you over the embassy in the US in Paris, but they don't want to send my letter. It was not allowed by German authority, and that's my first letter to renew acquaintances with you. 1941, it was a very bad year. Germans were strong and victorious everywhere. Here in France, we were nearly quiet, but nothing to eat. It was the same about food in these last 5 years, and now it's terrible. In 41, I met the girl I married the year after during this time. I was working for my father. 1942, Hitler was at his apex, and for us, the future very dark. Every night we listened to hear the news by BBC and by Boston. It was our only news, and it was not good. But the hope came back when you were in war side by side with England, Russia land, and Free French. And I was always in Paris and married my girl in March 3 years ago now. 1943, Stalingrad. The most important event, I believe, was Stalingrad. We knew from now on that one day or another we'll be delivered and free again. For us French boys, everyone, boss or worker, it was the year of deportation to work in Germany. The Nazis enacted the SPO, that means in English, obligatory service work. Every man called by the office must go to work in Germany. And about 150,000 Frenchmen and women are in this time in Germany. How many will be back after the year? Scenes of separation was sometimes terrible. I have been called 7 times, and every time I escape. But last one, I must go on to hide from German police in the mountains of Savoy. In October 1948, my wife gave me a charming baby girl we call Annie, and we have been very happy indeed. And it was a curious situation when I was hidden to know that I was a papa. 1944. For us Parisians, it was the year of liberation, but also the year of terror. On our side, the Nazis and Gestapo with their executions for nothing as their ideas. And on the other side, the raid of your Air Force day and night. Every day since March till August 26th, Liberation Day. Happily, I was back in Paris because my wife was terribly afraid about air raid. And we were going in the underground where danger was a given. At this period, we were nearly quiet in Paris. There were no more trains to Germany, but I was not going out very often, and at home I had a secret out to escape in case of danger. And one day, the 2nd Division of the Free French Forces was on the door of Paris, and on Saturday, 26 August, our dear General de Gaulle was at l'Arc de Triomphe on the Champs-Élysées. We are free, and Germans were away, killed, or prisoners. Really, we can't believe it. Americans in English came after in Paris. We were, as you can think it, very happy to see them. After, I have been a soldier during 6 months, and now I am back at home because we have no equipment. Poor French army. Why don't you give us all we are missing? We also need food. The winter was horrible, and you Americans can't imagine it. How it was. You get all you want. When I've been back home, I have a piece of paper from a cousin of yours. That cousin is Herschel White. Hook White, he lived here in Lebanon. So he was my grandmother's cousin. He told me you were married and the mother of a little girl too. How old is she? Congratulations, my dear Betty, but I don't know your name and your address. And excuse me if I send this letter always to you, Betty Cummings. I hope you will have it all right. Please write to me as soon as you can. I'm anxious to hear about you. Why didn't you write me before? Are you always so busy? May I ask you something? Excuse me if I dare it. Is it possible to send me a little package with 5 years of, I don't know, anything about American pictures? Can you send me some magazines about movies, old cars from the last 5 years? It does not matter. pictures from your fight against Japs and Germans. Here in France, aside from the wireless, we have no news anyway, because we have no paper. And I know in the States you have a lot of news, and I would like to read as documentation. I ask you now something quite different. As you know, perhaps here in France, the Germans take us everything, and we need clothes and so on. So we don't have very much. And I'm looking for my wife for her birthday about silk stockings. Here you can have it, but for Marde Noire, black market. And it's very expensive, about 1,200 francs a pair. It's about $24 for a pair of silk stockings. If it's not so dear in Ohio, can you send me 2 or 3 pairs? If it's not too much to ask. She's got little feet. Naturally, to pay you would be difficult, but perhaps you have friends of yours or parents or those that came to Paris. Please send them to me. I will be happy to show you our big town and speak a lot with them. You see, it's not possible to say to an unknown soldier to come at your home, but a friend of yours is different. He will be mine and my house is his home, and I and my wife will be very happy to know American soldiers and help those to know Paris. Please give them my address, in France, and you can tell them to come see me. So he had moved. So this is a picture of his address, what it looks today. That is a picture he sent my grandmother of his wife and his daughter. Then that's another street picture. That's a birth announcement of his daughter as well. Well, Betty, don't lose it and write to me if you like, and you want to continue correspondence with your French friend. Please send a picture of you 3. In my next letter, I'll send you a picture of us. I hope you will receive this letter quickly and soon, and that somebody of your family is still living at your old address to keep my letter and give it to you. Well, my dear friend, I must leave you now. Best regards to you, your husband, and your parents. Annie sends a kiss to your little girl. Your faithful friend, Maurice. So in that time, my grandparents got married. They married in November of 1940, so that's their wedding pictures. That's my grandfather, Bill McCurley, and my grandmother, Betty. And then this is their oldest, my mother, Carol, when she was a little girl. So she is the little girl that they're referencing in the letter. And by the time he would have written the letter, my grandmother was ready to have her second child. So my uncle, who my mom and my uncle are both here today. So he says, in August 18th, 1945, now in Paris, it is the peace conference. It looks like a comedy. What will come out of it? Peace? Another war? It seems to me exactly as if we're living on a volcano. I received last week your package. It's very kind of you, my dear Betty, and my wife and I thank you so very much. Unhappily, it's been a little destroyed during the travel. I mean, it was not here exactly the same as when you send it. Rice was missing, and inside a paper on which was written, this package has been caused to deteriorate in the boat during the travel. But nothing and everything here we are very happy to get. Last week, this is January 1947. Last week, my wife and I have been sending you a Christmas present, especially for you, my dear Betty. It is indeed a beautiful little thing from France, and many of your friends, boys, who are fighting in Bretagne shall recognize this little doll and her dress. It's not a doll or puppet to play with, like this one for children. It's an article of Paris for exportation. It's for you to put on your berth or on a sofa with its skirt amply extended on the quilt of your bed. We hope you will be happy with that gift and that it arrives very well and very quickly to you. So this isn't the actual doll. Unfortunately, it's long gone. But my mother and my uncles have all said that they remember the doll on a shelf in a place of prominence that they were forbidden to touch, that they were not allowed to play with or to touch, but that my grandmother had the doll for years on display. He says in February 1947, here in Paris, it's always the same. No food, no money, and plenty of strike. We need a man like Roosevelt or Churchill now that our de Gaulle is gone. And everything, the weather is now very cold since on month. Ice, snow, ice again, and no coal. Many people die every day. That is the follow of the war. We are not a country to visit right now. Our situation here is always very bad, and it really must change, and very soon. Since 1st of June, 150 grams of bread for one person. For us French, that's not much. For a country, politics is worse of everything. We die slowly from politics discussions, from strikes, and so on. Thank you, dear Betty, for all you want to do for us, and especially the children. It makes me something to ask. I am not used to, but you offer it so kindly. My wife very much liked your quick, ready soups, tomato and noodle soup. Rice also is impossible to find here, and soap for laundry. What you think we may need all is coming from the States is welcome here. About the baby shoes, send them if you like, if they're not too dear. First aid shoes. She is already walking, not too little, because if it takes too long to come, they will be too little for the girl. She is now 14 months old. Maurice. So that is the last letter that we have. We know that they still continued to write. My mother can remember her mother and grandmother. She said her mother kept a box in their pantry where she would always put extra food, like canned goods or the rice, and continued to send that to Maurice and his family. And we know that they did stay in contact, but I'm sure pretty soon, as we all understand, life takes over. My grandmother had 3 children total. And Maurice had 2 children, and life just happens and you lose touch. We did try to find Maurice. I went to Paris as a teenager. My mom and dad had been to Paris, and we just never could really find him. Then, of course, with the advent of the internet, I tried to find him a few times off and on. And I never was able to, but last spring, as I was preparing this talk for the Mason Historical Society, I thought, I'll give one more try and look on the internet. And I found his death certificate. So he died in 2020. He was not in Paris, which I think is one of the reasons why I couldn't find him in anything. Because he had moved to the southern France. But he died, not only did he live to be 100, and he died in 2020, he died on December 27th. And December 27th is my grandmother's birthday. So he died on my grandmother's 100th birthday, which is really strange, very strange. So I wish that we could have had contact with him. I've tried to look for his daughters, but we only have a first name and a maiden name, so I've not been able to find them. But it's a fascinating story to me, and I thank you for letting me share it. And like I said, I do share it with my students every year. We do study World War II in my classes that I teach, and they enjoy it and always ask a lot of questions and such. So, and I also try to point out to them that talk to your grandparents, talk to your aunts, talk to your uncles, talk to people about your family, about what they lived through. We all have lived through historic times. And I even make a point to the kids to say, you know, we're lucky that we have letters, that my grandmother kept them, that my mother kept them. We're lucky that they wrote to each other, and that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily do anymore, is write letters. But I try to really stress to my children, my students, I think all of us would say the same thing. I would love to have one more day with any of my grandparents and ask them a bunch of questions. And I just try to stress that to my students, that it's really important to know that and to get involved in that. So I thank you very much, and that is the end.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Do any have any questions for Suzanne?
How did they get each other's names to begin with?
In school, it was a program. Yes, they were both students. It was a pen pal program. So quite common from my understanding in the 1930s. So my grandmother graduated in 1938 from Mason High School. So
don't give up looking, because maybe the daughter
maybe.
has your grandmother's
Yeah,
letter.
that would be nice.
This isn't a question, it's a comment, but I think it's just such an incredible coincidence, because I've been watching Ken Burns'
Yes.
The Holocaust in the United States, and the desperation of Europe, please, United States, get involved, and
Yeah, it definitely comes across in his letters, definitely. So, yeah.
Well, thank you once again, Suzanne. It was fantastic and fascinating. Thank you for coming, folks. And please remember to visit the museum. There is also going to be a 10% discount at the gift shop if you want to go down and take a look at that. And hopefully we'll see you next month.